I became a Dominican because I wanted to be a monk missionary. These were the words our brother Aidan used to describe his own attraction to Dominican life. A monk missionary. Now, being a monk and a missionary at the same time sounds contradictory, but we see this vocation lived out again and again in the history of the Church. And it's the tension we see in the life of the monk, St. Birinus, whose feast we celebrate tomorrow. 2 miracles and 2 paragraphs from Bede are all we know about Birinus. Bede says that Birinus promised to the Pope that he would sow the seeds of the holy faith in the most inland and remote regions of the English, where no other teacher had been before him. That's ironically how he ended up in Dorchester-on-Thames, because once he'd arrived in England, in the nation of the West Saxons, where Bede says he found all to be confirmed pagans, he thought it more useful to preach there than to go further afield, looking for people to whom he should preach. He didn't have to go further afield to look for people who need to hear the gospel, and neither do we. Here, now, in England today, we don't have to go far to meet those who themselves need to meet Christ. They're on our doorstep, they're on the streets, they're in our workplaces, they're amongst our friends and family. Every time we meet someone who is without Christian faith, we have an opportunity to share the gospel with them. Now, Birinus set out to do something which he did not achieve. We too may have grand aspirations for preaching the gospel in the African jungle, in the slums of Jamaica, on the streets of Disneyland. But God does not ask us to be successful in our own personal ambitions, because he will provide plenty of opportunities for us to preach the gospel without us having to look for them. So we may set out to do something remarkable, but most of the time we won't, and we don't need to, because where we are most needed is often closest to home. Every Catholic is called to measure his or her discipleship by a criterion, an evangelical criterion. How, in my life, am I bringing others to the Lord Jesus? How, in my life, am I bringing others to the Lord Jesus? It's a daunting challenge, but we shouldn't forget that anyone living out any vocation well is being a missionary. Any vocation like that to religious life is itself a missionary endeavor. What we need today are priests, religious, and spouses who live out their faith, and that's difficult enough. But it can be attractive to those who have no faith. The future of the church in this country looks bleak as we enter another dark night in our island's history. But in order to keep the faith burning, the torch of the faith burning, we need more monk missionaries. What we need is another, doubtless very different, St. Birinus.